Good evening from New York. I'm Dan Rather. And if you're wondering whether it feels good to say that, well, it does. But this is something new. A newscast airing weekly on Monday nights. An old TV newsman leaning on new media to connect with our future. A collaboration between two organizations, my own, News and Guts, and the Young Turks. By the way, you may catch me talking with the team here off camera sometime during our newscast. We're low tech, but we have high aspirations. This is our answer to what TV news has become. By the way, this is my actual office, my old partner's desk that I treasure. No bells, no whistles. We're going to try to give you news, analysis, and commentary with as much context and perspective, including historical context, as possible, on stories that matter to the real lives of real people. I may sometimes tell you what I think, not what to think. I seek not to persuade you, but to inform you. We're launching this venture 2 days after the one-year anniversary of President Trump's inauguration. 1 day after the anniversary of the first Women's March. We'll close with my thoughts on why we're doing this and why we're doing it now. But we begin with the end of the 2018 government shutdown. Excuse me, the end of the first 2018 government shutdown. Today's deal to fund the government extends for only 3 weeks. On February 8th, perhaps, we'll do it all again. On Saturday, the first day of the showdown, President Trump's 2020 re-election campaign put out an ad blaming Democrats for this mess, for the shutdown and for the, quote, murders that will occur if Democrats get their way on immigration.
That's illegal immigrant Luis Bracamontes, charged with murdering 2 police officers. It's pure evil. President Trump is right. Build the wall. Deport criminals. Stop illegal immigration now. Democrats who stand in our way will be complicit in every murder committed by illegal immigrants. President Trump will fix our border and keep our families safe.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Well, Democrats said they agreed to a 3-week extension because of a promise by Senate Republicans, a promise to vote on DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, which lets immigrants brought here as children stay here and work. We should note that when President Trump suspended DACA, he told Congress to restore it in legislative form. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell told Democrats he will permit a vote on DACA on February 8th if Congress can't strike an overall immigration deal by that time. Democratic Whip Dick Durbin took to the Senate floor to assure Dreamers his party is not abandoning them.
We have gathered the largest bipartisan group of senators to ever commit to moving forward on the DREAM Act and immigration. We have a process. I want to thank Senator McConnell for explicitly saying today it will be a level playing field. It will be open to both sides. We will move to the issue, as you characterized it this morning, of DACA and immigration. Thank you for doing that. I believe that sets the stage for us to work together. For the first time in 5 years, we will have a debate on the floor of the Senate on the DREAM Act and immigration. To all the Dreamers who are watching today, don't give up. I know that your lives are hanging in the balance on what we do here on Capitol Hill and with the White House. 3 weeks from now, I hope to be joining you in celebrating the passage with you and your families and your communities of a measure which will strengthen America and give you an opportunity to be part of our future. Mr. President, you.
Of course, no one asked the House of Representatives about all this, which could mean that on February 8th, we do it all over again. Holding the government hostage did not used to be a standard negotiating tactic. The government and its functions were what each side fought for. So, if you see and hear news reports later today and tonight that the crisis is over, consider that it has merely slowed back down to its previous pace. That's basically what's happened. Consider that shutdowns are, to the way we govern today, as combustion is to corrosion. That is, a sudden flare-up of a similar process already underway. Consider the vision of government made manifest in how this showdown rolled out. Uniformed military was still on duty. 96% of housing and urban development staff sent home. 87% of Homeland Security workers told to show up, compared to 10% at the Department of Education. And you get the idea. Now, consider the slow motion government shutdown. Try telling Puerto Rico the government shutdown is over. More than a third of Puerto Rico remains without power. On Wednesday, before the showdown, the newspaper El Nuevo Dia reported that the Trump administration is withholding a $1 billion loan to the island. Also last week, the agency created to protect bank customers, said it will not enforce a recent rule on payday lenders. On Tuesday, we learned that most of the National Park System Advisory Board has quit. You get the idea. And if most media ignore the year-long slow motion shutdown, if Democrats don't raise enough of a stink about it, maybe it's because too many of us have signaled that we're on board. When President Reagan said the scariest words are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help," we got the joke. We laughed along, but it was not always like this, folks, and that's something worth thinking about. Look, the government, when it works as it should work, takes on big projects for the country as a whole. Think about President Eisenhower championing the building of the interstate highway system. President Kennedy and President Johnson with "Let's send a man to the moon." President Roosevelt with the safety net, including Social Security. Go all the way back to Theodore Roosevelt, who broke up the big mining and oil cartels, the big corporate monopolies, and also set the country in a course of conservation of some of our most important lands. These were big projects. They had the support of the country as a whole, and presidents led those kinds of accomplishments. We're capable of doing that again, and I'm not here to praise President Trump, but it should be noted that President Trump, during the campaign, he talked about all kinds of big projects, infrastructure being one of them. There are big projects that only the government, representing all the country's people, can accomplish. And we've done this in the past. And for those who question, well, I don't know now, and with all the polarization, whether they can do it, of course we can do it. What it requires is a national consensus on what needs to be done, a president who will exert some leadership on it, a Congress who will follow the president's leadership and expand on it. I'll give you one of my favorites if you're thinking about, well, Dan, what kind of big project could we do now? And keep in mind the context of this, folks, is this whole movement has been taking a long time, the whole movement to convince the American people that the government is bad, get the government out of our lives. Well, first of all, it's not really practical to do that. And secondly, well, at least question whether it's a good idea. But I was going to say, if you want something to really get behind, in which the overwhelming majority of the country could get behind, a President Trump presumably could get behind, and we get something done, is the top three priorities of this country. You can make a case that the top three priorities ought to be in order: education, education, and education, particularly revitalizing and reforming public school education, which for so long was the absolute backbone of the country, the spine of the country, and which really catapulted the country forward to making the 20th century our century, was education, education, education. That's just one of the examples. If we're willing to think big, if we're willing to say, of course government has a role in doing big things, it doesn't have to be going to Mars. For example, who's going to lead in the 21st century in developing artificial intelligence? It's one of the big developments that's going to span this whole century. Are the Chinese going to lead in that? Is somebody else, or are we going to lead in that? That's a kind of big thing that government at its best and presidential leadership at its best can actually make happen. Now, of course, the pundits will tell us that we will bounce from shutdown to shutdown now because it is uniquely impossible to deal with President Donald Trump. Like negotiating with Jell-O, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer said. But Mr. Trump is less an anomaly than many admit. Is Mr. Trump's intellect truly less robust than, say, that of Vice Presidential candidate Sarah Palin? Has America really blundered worse under Trump than it did by invading Iraq? America did not teleport into 2018. We walked a path, brightly lit by the neon warning signs of our past. We have been down this path before, and we do know the way back. The way back, among other things, is not to have this idea that somehow or another education is bad, somehow or another intellectualism is bad. There's a very dangerous virus, sort of loose, much of it coming from the leadership of the country, that somehow education is not so to be valued as it once was, that somehow there's actually an anti-science movement. It's very clear. Anti-science movement, do we really want that? Is that really going to take us back? And there was a time not long ago when scientists were among our biggest heroes, finding, for example, a cure for polio and all kinds of accomplishments. Where does this come from, this idea that, well, we don't need to think of a college education for nearly as many people as we once did? You know, I've said, and I'll say again, that the American people are pretty good at separating brass tacks from bullshine. And when somebody tries to convince us that what this country needs is really less education, particularly less higher education, what this country needs is fewer scientists and less of an emphasis on science, that's not the way back. That's not the way forward. It never has been for the country, and it can't be now. Now, that's just what I think. Again, I'm not telling you, I'm not even suggesting to you what you should think. But in all of that, maybe there are a few points to ponder. I hope so.